U.S. President Donald Trump visits hurricane-ravaged Puerto Rico, and following the worst mass shooting in the history of the United States, he's heading to Las Vegas too. Hello, I'm Anand Naidoo, and this is The Heat. It's been 2 weeks now since Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, causing massive devastation. The island of more than 3 million people is a territory of the United States, and in the aftermath of the hurricane, the mayor of San Juan was critical of the United States government's response. In turn, U.S. President Donald Trump accused her of, quote, poor leadership. On Tuesday, President Trump paid a visit to the island to see the situation firsthand. And during a meeting with the governor and other officials, he praised the overall government effort, both at the local and federal level. Let's listen.
And you look at what happened here with really a storm that was just totally overpowering. Nobody's ever seen anything like this. And what is your death count as of this moment? 17?
16 certified.
16 people certified. 16 people versus in the thousands. You can be very proud of all of your people, all of our people working together. 16 versus literally thousands of people. You can be very proud. Everybody around this table and everybody watching can really be very proud of what's taken place in Puerto Rico.
And for more now on President Trump's visit and the situation in Puerto Rico, joining us from San Juan is CGTN correspondent Nitza Soledad Perez. Nitza, what's been the reaction there to President Trump's visit and what he had to say, and what is the situation there right now?
Islanders are not fans of U.S. President Trump. First, he's had harsh words for the Latino community, and Hurricane Maria's aftermath has given Puerto Ricans more reasons not to trust him. First, he's maintained a fierce defense of the federal response to Hurricane Maria here in Puerto Rico, but here locals deem it as slow and inefficient. Even the general that he appointed to lead the efforts acknowledged a few days back that there were not enough troops nor equipment to lead and to have the proper assistance here in Puerto Rico. President Trump also tweeted that Puerto Ricans wanted everything handed to them, which is not accurate according to my experience and what I've seen. You can see it even here in the tourist zone. This area is clean. This has been done by the local government, local businesses, and the neighbors of the area. Now, many in Puerto Rico, the people that I've talked to, they hope that this visit gave President Trump the true perspective of the level of devastation that's going on. Others couldn't wait for him to leave. They think that Mr. Trump is racist and that he treats Puerto Ricans as second-class U.S. citizens. Now, to your second question about the situation here on the island, well, I have to admit that it's still complicated. It is dire. 95% of the island is without power, 55% without water. Only 40% of communications are up, but that 40%, it's pretty unstable. Now, many of the clinics that we've visited, they do have diesel, but they don't know for how long they will have that fuel to keep the hospitals running, or how long will they have to take care of patients. We're also getting reports that in the shelters, there are outbreaks of pink eye and so on, and many elderly people and people in poor areas are dying because of the lack of medical care. So that is what's still happening here in Puerto Rico, and I just got information that President Trump will ask for $29 billion to Congress for disaster relief. Anand?
Thanks, Nitza. That's CGTN's Nitza Soledad Perez reporting from San Juan. Well, let's get to our panel right now. Joining us here in the studio is Maria Pena. She's a senior political reporter for La Opinion. With us from Tampa, Florida is Dan Perkins. He is an author and commentator and a supporter of President Trump. Also with us in the studio is Simon Marks. He is a global affairs correspondent, and he's the president of Feature Story News. And with us too is Atiba Madyun. He's a political analyst and strategist, and he's the president of Party Politics United States. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Maria, let me start with you. We just heard from our correspondent there. 2 weeks after this disaster, 90% of Puerto Rico without power, 40% without water. What do you make of the federal response, and particularly the response we've seen from President Trump?
Well, you know, what I get from talking to sources both on and off the Hill is that the administration was slow in responding to the crisis. And so if you look at the chronology of events, yes, President Trump declared a state of emergency for Puerto Rico, but then they went silent for about a couple of days, 3-4 days, where the administration was not making any public statements. And then that weekend, he went to play golf in New Jersey, and a lot of Puerto Ricans really took offense at that. So while you have this massive effort being led by FEMA and other federal agencies, you know, sending rescue teams on the ground, the situation, the perception is that it was slow in responding. So naturally what happens, of course, we know that when the president gets criticized, he pushes back, and he pushes back even, you know, with harsh words and terms. Today, for instance, at that table, you know, he hardly acknowledged the mayor of San Juan. You know, he attacked her on Twitter, and then today he barely acknowledged her, and he kept on praising the other officials in the room, except her. And then for him to compare calamities, you know, a lot of people took offense at that too. When he said about how the crisis is going to affect the U.S. budget, people took offense at the way he said it, because Puerto Ricans are American citizens. Right. They do pay federal taxes. They probably don't pay income taxes, but they do pay all these other federal taxes. So there's that underlying criticism that perhaps Puerto Ricans are not really Americans and they're actually a burden to the U.S. government. So people took offense at that as well. And so I guess, so in the meantime, in parallel, you have all these NGOs and all these international and local and state groups trying to, you know, get together and send aid to Puerto Rico. I've been to some of those fundraising events, and people are pulling together. American citizens are helping one another out, as it happens in many tragedies. So I guess it's a mixed bag of reactions to the way the administration has been handling this.
Okay, let me bring Dan Perkins in on this. Dan, what did you make of this criticism of President Trump? I mean, he's done some things which have been criticized. He said this was not a real catastrophe. He picked a fight with the mayor of San Juan. He made jokes about it. He said that this is going to hurt the federal budget. Is this fair criticism?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. I find it amazing that the mayor of San Juan, a week ago yesterday, was complimenting FEMA and the response of the American government. 4 days later, on Friday, she wears a black T-shirt with it says, "We're dying." And she did a presentation when she criticized the president and the response of the administration, standing in front of a mountain of food and water. So other mayors around the city of San Juan have criticized the mayor of San Juan for not participating in the meetings of how they're going to deal with this problem. She didn't show up.
Okay, Atiba, there is a serious shortage of medicines, of water, of food on the island. In fact, U.S. Congressman Luis Gutierrez, who has Puerto Rican roots, said that this situation is in fact going to get a lot worse.
Well, I can only tell you what I've been told. And so in talking with the executive director for the National Hispanic Caucus of State Legislators, Kenneth Romero, who went on the Hill because part of the issue with getting supplies to Puerto Rico was the Jones Act. So we had to wait for the president to relax the provisions of the Jones Act.
Okay, explain that.
For 10 days. For 10 days. The Jones Act basically says that only American maritime ships can go into Puerto Rico. So that meant that any country, anyone else who wanted to try and provide aid to Puerto Rico could not come in. Second is, I have a friend who chartered a plane to go to Puerto Rico. And the thing that he told me, this is a conservative Republican, he said himself, he was frustrated that he couldn't take medication down to the island. There's a lot of things that are going on, but he was able to take fuel, he was able to take water, and then he was also able to help some people get off the island. But what we have to look at over this is the human aspect of this. I have a friend who was there during the storm. She described this hurricane as being in an 18-hour tornado. And after the storm, she had to try to find a place to stay. And when you hear the stories, when I talk to elected officials that are there on the island, when you hear the stories of what's really happening, yes, we're hearing what the mayor is saying, but this has become a political fight between the president and that is taking
one at that.
an unnecessary one. It's taking the attention off of the human aspect of the people that are in need, the people that don't have power, the people that don't have water, the people that don't have the basic necessities.
All right, let me go to Simon. Simon, this has become a political issue, hasn't it? You've got the Atlantic magazine, which says that the president seems to be more concerned with the political ramifications rather than the crisis itself.
Look, when you're president of the United States, you play two roles. You're the head of the government, and that's a political role. But you're also the head of state. And when crises like natural disasters or shooting sprees in Las Vegas occur, it is your role to behave like the head of state. You are the person who can express empathy for the people who are going through very, very real hardship, whatever the nature of that hardship. If you look at the imagery of Donald Trump in Puerto Rico just a few hours ago, there's almost a feudal sense to it. I mean, there's almost a sort of imperialist sense to this. I'm going to come here, I'm going to grab a few rolls of paper towels and throw them out into the crowd. I'm going to tell you that you should be feeling pretty good, because really congratulate yourself and grateful, but congratulate yourself on this low death toll. Even though, by the way, the death toll is by no means final. It's at 16 because the hospitals yet haven't certified the number of people who have actually died as a result of this hurricane. So the optics, the language, the approach to this runs counter to anything that any predecessor in the White House would have adopted under similar circumstances.
And then also we have to remember, in addition to, you have Puerto Rico that was already dealing with a financial crisis, over $72 billion in debt. Then you have the humanitarian crisis. And next, I've been talking to sources, the next step is, okay, you have the recovery efforts going on, and in the meantime, you have a high risk, a very, very high risk of epidemics that were already under control before the hurricane, but now you're facing a real threat of a public safety, a public health risk because of the mosquitoes that breed in the water. And you have a huge potential for this to get much, much, much worse in the coming weeks.
I want to get Dan Perkins' response. Very quickly, Dan, I want to move on to the shootings afterwards.
Yeah, I think what we're talking about here is we have to understand that this is more than $29 billion that the president is going to get. There's as the young lady said, there's $72 billion of debt that this country has amassed. In fact, it is the third largest debtor between New York and California. And they don't have the money. Their island's been terribly destroyed. They're not going to be able to make the payments. So this issue is not $29 billion. It's $29 billion plus $72 billion. And where does the money come from? It comes from the taxpayers. And what are they going to do with it? Are they going to give it away? It's a problem.
Okay.
Well, the U.S. hasn't condoned that debt, first of all, and there's an ongoing debate about whether or not the oversight committee that was imposed on the island is actually helping solve the crisis.